God, you should totally leave her.
Right.
All right. Well, let's transition into this. We have a couple seconds here.
Sex.
And we'll do this on the other side as well. This idea of sex addiction therapy. Obviously, it's a huge deal.
Controversial.
Listen.
I just feel bad for the horses.
The horses.
There's
always
a lot of
horses.
equine therapy.
Equine therapy for sex addiction?
Yes. Anthony Weiner
was all the pictures they would show while he was in
Weinstein's
therapy.
going to has horses. I mean, what the hell are we doing here?
Here's my, and again, obviously not studied up on this. Sex feels good, and people will go out of their way to do nasty things to get it, hurtful things to get it.
Right.
So I don't think it's an addiction thing. I think it's a basic human drive that people are willing to forego their normal.
Well, that is one side of the argument. Others argue that, look, if gambling is the first behavioral addiction that is in the DSM, and it has a real, the DSM meaning the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it has a real diagnosis. Why doesn't sex addiction? Now, when we look at addiction, we're going to compare it, right, to the other addictions out there, say substance abuse.
Sure.
And we look at things like habituation. It becomes a habit. Withdrawal, if there are actual physiological withdrawal symptoms, that's a sign of an addiction. Escalating risk-taking behaviors in order to acquire the substance, and eventual alteration of brain structures. And all this become, very similar to, sexual compulsion disorder, they call it now. They have the same outcome, if you will. Now, what people worry about is that we're going to judge the sexual behavior itself, the kind, the duration, with who, whatever, because nobody says when someone says, I'm an alcoholic, really? What do you drink? How much? What time of day? Oh, that's so cool. That's interesting. No, I don't think you're an alcoholic because it's only wine. It's not vodka, right? They don't say that. They don't ask for details. But we get all messed up with this, and there's where it becomes the problem, and there's where the debate is some of the sexual behavior just normal sexual behavior that we're pathologizing? Some people have a higher sex drive than others.
I feel like a lot of it has to do with when you slap a label like addiction on a certain behavior, you get an excuse. You get it's not my fault. My brain chemistry's been changed.
Well, you also get treatment.
Yeah.
Well, but if
things have a name,
if you went and blew $50,000 at the tables in Vegas, and then came up with but I'm an addict, they're not wiping away your $50,000 debt. Mm-hmm. And my fear is, I think to go with what Shannon's talking about, is that people can claim this and then all of a sudden also feel like they're owed an apology. Well, it wasn't my fault.
Right. They can behave however they want and then call it an addiction and wash their hands of it. Well, I didn't have any control in the matter. It's an addiction.
I think we need to stop and think about every single human behavior has a biopsychosocial influence, right? So whether it is substance addiction, because plenty of people start using substances because they weren't taught how to manage their feelings or they had trauma early in life and they're trying to squelch their feelings and self-medicate, right? And so we treat with good sex addiction treatment, and whether you want to call it sexual compulsion behavior or whether you want to call it sex addiction, the treatment's the same as getting at the underlying feelings that cause a thing. It's not saying it's not your fault because it's become a disease. It's saying what caused the disease. It's like going to your primary care physician instead of waiting until you have a heart attack and have to go to the ER. Now, just because you go to your primary care physician and you find out you have high cholesterol doesn't always mean it's that you're eating too much bad food. It could be genetic. We don't know, but it's not about blaming. It's getting to underlying causes.
I totally get that, and especially when it comes to chemical addiction and alcohol addiction. But when it comes to somebody like Harvey Weinstein, who is just a power apple, a guy who is not a good guy, and he's got a lot of power.
Bad apple, not a good one like the one he's eating.
A lot of power. I don't care how he got to be that way. I don't want to give him the victim label at all. He's just not a good person.
Well,
we'll talk about that. We'll come back
I want to argue with her when we come back.
We'll talk about that when we come back to Gary and Shannon. Dr. Wendy has joined us talking about what is sex addiction therapy. Gary and Shannon will continue.